Perfect. Okay. I think good. Okay, sounds good. All right, perfect. All right, good morning, everyone. All these people in front of me this morning. Hey, we got some people online too, so thank you very much. And we are recording, so we'll be able to watch this a little bit later. I wanted to share some stuff with you guys because I teach PA at the Realty School. And I also teach PA again to the community that's far. And why not teach PA to my existing friends as well? And then upon request, if you guys want to discuss any parts of the PA that I'm not covering, I'm more than happy to do that. But I wanted to cover some specific parts today based on some crazy experiences I've had in the past. About something that's happened as a kid that you really enjoyed doing, but all of a sudden something sort of traumatic happened and then it completely changed your like outlook on doing that again. Like, how many of you guys have been sledding at Green Acres? You guys heard of Green Acres? I think it's like outside Water, Oakdale or something like. You live by Corby? Corby by Green Acres.
By Monterville?
Yeah. What it is?
To Monterville, yep.
Yes, yes. It's off of that road. You go back and it's people, nice, like sliding and tubing, and then grab onto the rope and it pulls back up. I'd never been there as a kid, but I was there back in college and I was super excited about it. And got up the hill and it was literally the first time I was going down the hill. And I got to the top, went down, hit a patch of ice. Was not expecting that. Flipped over, knocked my head and got a concussion. And I didn't stop necessarily snow tubing after that, but that completely changed like how I felt moving forward every time I would go tubing. And I knew like there's a potential of something happening. And now I'm going to be a lot more careful about where I end up tubing moving forward. So kind of a strange analogy, but that explains like the purchase agreement for me. Like I would go through the purchase agreement, not think too much of it, and then all of a sudden something traumatic would happen in the transaction. And now I view the purchase agreement so much differently now because of that. I'm a lot more cautious about certain things based on these traumatic experiences that I had in the past. So one of the parts of the purchase agreement that I want to talk about this morning specifically, that a lot of us maybe don't pay as much attention to or think we know, do we actually know? And this is a section as we get to, here we go. Talking about prorated taxes, special assessments. Do we actually know what this section means? I thought I did a few years ago and realized that I did not. I had a listing in Woodbury. And right as we were getting ready to put the house on the market, my sellers said we had gotten a notice from the city just maybe 2 weeks ago. And it said that they are going to be meeting and talking potentially about doing some work in this neighborhood in Woodbury. Where apparently a lot of homes in this neighborhood have been getting water in the basement to the point where they realize it's because of where these homes lie. And so they were talking about digging drainage ditches, and it was a huge project to try and prevent some of this water coming into these homes in this particular neighborhood. And so I said, okay, they talked about an assessment yet? And they said, well, no, but we're assuming that could potentially be the case. But at this point, they're not even sure they want to do this project. And so I said, okay, when are they meeting? Well, they're meeting on this date. Okay. So putting it on the market, as the home is going to be on the market, there's going to be this meeting of a potential investment. So what do we do as a listing agent when we run into this situation? What do you guys think?
Well,
We disclose. And what do we say?
Has received notice of a potential project that could result in an assessment.
Exactly. And that's what I did was, we're notified by the city that they're going to be meeting about some drainage work. It could result in assessment. Not, but it could. It depends on what they decide, what they vote on. So we get an offer. The offer comes in and they have seller shall pay, seller shall pay, seller shall pay on everything. But then they do say that the seller has been notified of potential assessment. And so we come back and say, okay, here's the deal. The seller doesn't want to be on the hook at this point in time. We'd like to negotiate this. And buyers didn't want to negotiate. We left it at seller's. And so we put we disclose that information that it's a potential assessment. So we get to the closing. We had never heard anything more. My sellers even proactively got a hold of me and said, is there anything more that you can tell us about this assessment? And they said no. And so they in fact had postponed that meeting out when they were supposed to make a decision of when they were even going to vote on having this drainage system put in. And so on the date of closing, and I feel like I did everything I needed to do for my seller at this point. We were upfront, we disclosed, we even did our due diligence, and I reported back to the agent and said, we disclosed all of this. We've done our research. So as of the date of closing, we closed. And literally the next day, I had a phone call from the buyer's agent saying that the buyers went to check the mail. In the mailbox with a letter from the city saying that there's going to be a $5,000 assessment going on to next year's taxes. And the buyers were upset and felt that the sellers should have paid that assessment. So what do you guys think at this point in time? What would you do as a listing agent?
Was it postmarked? Any unpaid assessments, but if we postmarked before the closing, then I think it's the seller's responsibility.
It was postmarked the day of.
Day of.
It got into the mailbox on the day of closing. No one was in the house to grab the mail. And so the buyers got it in their mailbox the next day. Interesting, huh?
The seller's off the hook because it didn't exist.
The seller could be off the hook because it didn't exist. Exactly. The buyers came back and argued and said, as of the date of closing, the seller should be responsible for paying, because that's what the PA reads. And that letter was postmarked the day of the closing. Therefore, they believed that the seller should be responsible. Interesting, huh? So we had to look and pick apart this PA. And so when you look at Law 226 talks about deferred taxes or special assessments, which is required as a result of the closing of the sale. That's an assessment in what case? What kind of assessment is that discussing?
Been in one that's already, yeah.
And that's already been. Exactly, and also one that is required to be paid off in full. At closing. Because there's some assessments that they're not going to allow a buyer to assume. It has to be paid for at the closing by someone. So we need to understand what that means first of all, and in my Woodbury case, that wasn't the case. They hadn't already been paying on something. It wasn't something that would need to be paid off at the closing, so that eliminates that. Now we've got line 28 to 29. All installments of special assessments certified for payment with the real estate taxes payable in the year of the closing. So certified for payment is the main phrase there. So what's the difference between that one and the first one we just looked at?
Been assessed, like not showing it. I mean, so like, it will be, part of there.
Not necessarily, because it's paid in the year of the closing.
Would that be, so let's say it's a 5-year assessment, $1,000 a year. Dash.
Bingo. So the difference between the first one and the second one is that the second one also has been certified for payment. And it has been added on to those taxes that are due in this current year. But it's not necessarily one that needs to be paid in full. Like that first one. So then that's why they're asking, is the buyer and seller going to prorate that amount? Or the seller should pay that? You could even say that, you know, the buyer would take it on as well. That's certified for payment with taxes and everything that's due in that current year. Make sense? But the Woodbury situation still doesn't apply to that though, right? Because it was not added on to the current year taxes. Now we've got the next one, one that says buyers shall pay on a date of closing all other special assessments levied as of the date of this purchase agreement. What's the word levied mean?
Planned.
It means it's like, we were. Think about. Have this on. Whatever.
Exactly. So it hasn't been certified for payment. Certified for payment means that it has been applied and it's added onto those taxes. Levied means it's been decided, it just hasn't been added on to this year's. Yeah, it's a huge one and it's pretty much said and done. If you look up the definition of a levied assessment, is a decided assessment.
Is that where you're now, it says day of closing, right?
That's the key is all other special assessment levied as of the date of this purchase agreement. That particular assessment in Woodbury was not levied as the date of the purchase. So that doesn't mean anything. And that still protects my score at this point too. Then we've got buyer shall assume and seller shall provide payment of special assessment pending as of the date of this purchase agreement for improvements that have been ordered by any assessing authority. It talks further about the provision for payment shall be made into the amount. So this is where the buyers came back and said, right there. It's a special assessment pending, and I said, no, pending as of the date of the purchase agreement. And as of the date of the purchase agreement, that assessment was not pending. The assessment wasn't even an assessment yet. Because pending means, what's the difference between pending and levied?
Been decided.
It hasn't been decided. Levied means that this is, so we just are going to pay on taxes. Pending means that pending is pending something, pending a full decision. possibly, maybe they don't know the owner yet, maybe they don't know who it is yet. You know, maybe it has not fully been decided, but it's pending. But the key is, it was as of the date of the purchase agreement, not the date of the closing. So I went back as the listing agent and said that still doesn't apply. So then we went and took a look at buyers shall pay any unpaid special assessment payable in the year following the closing and thereafter. Payment which is not otherwise here provided. So I said right there. This is a special assessment payable and it's going to be a next year's taxes. Probably, according to that notice that we had gotten on the date of closing. And the buyer says, no, though, hold on. As of the date of the purchase agreement, the seller did represent that they received notice regarding a new improvement project. Any such notice received by seller after the date of the purchase agreement and before closing shall be provided to the buyer immediately. I said, well, we disclosed what we knew. And they said, well, you knew more as of the closing date. And I said, actually, we didn't. Because it says if such notice is issued after the date of this purchase agreement on or before the date of closing, parties can do in writing. That needs to be handled. The notice was issued. I said, but it wasn't received. The seller legally didn't receive it. They weren't living in the house anymore. That's kind of a gray area though, right? But I said it, seller had said they received that initial notice. They received the other one, the date of, they weren't there to receive it. So therefore they couldn't release it.
Did they check?
They what?
Check it out.
Yes, because we received that initial notice of a potential of the meeting. Potential assessment.
I would think you're good. But. Good, you're wet, way this is laid out. Oh, well, yeah, student here to the buyers.
Oh, I feel like it was a material fact. Because it could potentially affect them. I didn't want to get caught in a situation where they just said, you didn't tell us anything. Something. So whenever I know something, I'm going to be upfront and do something about that. But that really had me looking line by line, sentence by sentence, every single word. What does this mean? And who is going to be in favor of? You know what happened? The buyer ended up getting an attorney. The attorney took a look at this. I actually called Lynn and you talked to the legal hotline. So we had the legal hotline attorneys, we had buyers attorneys. Both sets of attorneys said this is a gray area. Because we see both sides of the coin and it is 100%. So then both sets of attorneys, the legal hotline, the sellers need to retain an attorney at this point. Because the buyers are going to still choose the action, this is a gray area, but it could be anyone's. Yeah. My sellers ended up having to get an attorney as well. Seller's attorney and the buyer's attorney said it's so gray that you're going to have to battle this out in court for over $5,000. Or what you could do is you could legal action against the agent and brokers not properly following up on their fiduciary duties to protect you from something like this happening further. And the attorneys put it back on us. It's a shame on both of you agents when you were first initially receiving that disclosure, especially that buyer's agent. That buyer's agent should have said that into fruition. Here's exactly how we need to handle the work and how to bring it. And he didn't. And so they went back and said, see if you can sell outside of court with the person, the agent. And the buyer's agent became incognito. He stopped returning phone calls. He wouldn't answer emails, text messages to his client, to me, to anyone. He didn't want anything to do with it. And my sellers came back to me and said, we don't want to seek legal action against you for this. We really don't want to do that, but at the same time, you know, that I don't think it's fair we pay for the full assessment. What should we do? So this was all stretched out. We got this. And so then I talked to Lynn and Lynn said, look, you want to salvage your sellers, support my relationship with my sellers. And the sellers and I agreed to split the cost. They paid half. They paid for the assessment. I think the buyer's agent should have been responsible for that personally, but that's him and his relationship thereof with his client. I've got clients for life because I was really willing to help them out. That even though I don't think I was in the wrong necessarily for it, but
Buyers didn't throw anything at the
buyers did nothing. Yeah. It was a gray area.
Right?
I feel like I did what I needed to do.
At the same time, I feel like the buyers have legitimate fair. They're not just see side of this.
Yeah, the buyers were firm, you know, and they were adamant that those sellers should have been responsible for paying, you know, even if the attorneys were paying, but they were upset, rightly so. You know, who wants to move into a house and the next day realize you're being stuck with a $5,000 assessment? Now, granted, side conversations I was having was it's $5,000 and it's gonna be stretched out on your taxes for the next 10 years. Hardly gonna notice the difference for them. It was love it. But that got me really, really nervous moving forward. Whenever I fill out a purchase agreement, especially as a buyer's agent, I want to be well aware of any potential assessment moving forward, even if there's a whisper about something. I am putting an amendment together and I'm gonna say, if this turns into something, this is what's going to happen. And more than once now, I have not regretted doing that because we've run into that similar situation. Especially with like HOAs, you have potential assessments coming out there. So that's one thing that I think is really important for us because I think a lot of us just think, you know, the difference between these, but do we really? So, lots of questions.
Have you done really deal with that agent?
No, I remember him.
Is he still doing real estate?
He's still doing real estate. Yeah. Yes, he is. Another one I wanted to go through that a lot of agents don't have a full understanding of. Like Corby and I talk about a lot. Financing contingency. Do we really understand the two options? In terms of that financing contingency? How many of you guys feel like you know that pretty well?
Like, since it changed, I know, yeah, it changed like last August, maybe?
Yeah, they have changed it again.
Yeah.
Still don't like it. I'm really excited, by the way. T and I had met one of the attorneys from when we were running the private, and he got me all worked up a bunch of running the forms committee. So I want to get it, be a part of the forms committee, so I help make big decisions like this. So when I teach this to the new agents, I talk about the fact that we have the choice to make as the buyer's agent when we write the offer to either use line 7A or 7B in terms of mortgage financing contingency. So for you guys, when you're representing your buyers, what typically puts when we initiate the offer? Sean, do you usually do the first box or the,
I usually do the second box, and I do the written statement,
why do you usually choose the second?
because I think that especially if you're in a competitive situation with a buyer, it's gonna be more seller friendly and it's gonna help your offer stand out. If you offer a deadline by which you're gonna provide, the lender's gonna provide a written statement date.
It shows, I think, a lot more of a commitment, and a lot more of a stronger buyer. If you're being upfront, and saying, hey, look, I'm willing to commit to a certain date. You better have a good relationship though with your lender and know that they're gonna be able to do that. And when I'm representing the seller, I want to see $1.76 also. Because I don't want to get, to closing and find out that everything's gonna go through, and I feel like that date also turns the key a little bit on the lender to be able to get that going a little bit faster. I have used that date to get out of a purchase agreement for my seller. So it can be powerful. I had a situation last year, 2 years ago, last year maybe, I don't know, it was a 4 year. I had 5 actions pulled in a row. It was right before I quarantined. 5 pulled in a row. And I had a situation where, and this goes back to our fiduciary duties. We have to obey as long as it's within law. And sometimes we're in situations we would rather not obey. And I had a client and their family, and they were in the midst of selling a townhouse. And we had a hard time selling it. It was getting past the 4th of July. And the past couple of years now, past the 4th of July, things are down. Past 4th of July, if we would have put it on the market a little bit earlier, I think we would have had more offers, but we're on the market for about 7 weeks. Ended up taking an offer with an agent and the lender that I just didn't feel very solid about. And financial piece of that didn't make me comfortable either. And so when we negotiated that offer, I wanted a written statement date on there, and I wanted that to occur a little over a week before closing. So what does that actually mean? First of all, what does that written statement actually mean? What it means is that on or before that established date, we need to have a mortgage lender provide a written statement, which, by the way, as a listing agent, open up that written statement and read it. Because I have received written statements in the past from lenders, and when I open it up, it's not a written statement. Lenders, it's nothing in there, and I'm like, what is this? And it doesn't have anything in there that says that the appraisal was done. It doesn't have anything in there saying underwriting it's done. It was the pre-approval letter all over it. And I was like, this is not a written statement, and I'm not going to accept that. We have a seller. So we need to make sure that it truly is a written statement. It states that that buyer is approved for the loan. The appraisal has been done. Conditions have been met. Everything's good to go to close the loan. So obviously it says that upon delivery of that written statement, if there's something that the seller does that makes it so that they can't provide that written statement, you're not going to hold that against them if it's something that the seller has failed to do. However, we go on to read. Upon delivery of the written statement, its purchase agreement did not close on that stated closing date for any reason relating to financing. The seller may, as seller's option to put this purchase agreement canceled when the purchase agreement is canceled. If the seller declares it canceled, buyer and seller sign a cancellation, granting all earnest money forfeited to the seller as liquidated damage. So what that's doing is it's protecting the seller in the event that they receive that written statement. And it doesn't end up closing something for the finance, the seller loses their earnest, right? That rate, the buyer. The buyer loses earnest money. Now, the seller can declare purchase agreement canceled, obviously, again, if it's something that they feel is the deal. But then we go to line 103 and it says, if the written statement is not provided by that date, the seller may declare the purchase and cancel by written notice to the buyer at any time prior to receiving that written statement. Now, someone once asked me, oh, the seller can cancel for any reason? No, it has to have to do with this particular clause. It doesn't leave it general open with this cancel at any time. Just in regards specifically to that written statement. So if we get to that written statement date and we haven't received that written notice, we can specify here saying, okay, the seller could cancel and it gets their earnest money back at that point. I had to take advantage of that for my sellers. We had this accepted offer. I was already a little bit nervous about the financing anyhow. Seller calls me and says, we can't sell the property anymore. We have a situation. We've got some family that live in our native country. Our native country is now under attack. We have to spend money some way, somehow to family to help one. And the money that we need is we're supposed to be putting into our next house. We have to cancel the whole transaction. And I think we're going to be in default. You're not like $10,000. And so I said, okay, wow, we do. So I knew that that date hadn't quite reached that final finance yet. Legally could out of this as long as we didn't get that written statement on that date. And so it was a strike of luck, by the way. The lender that I was really upset about, that really was not a good lender. I knew, I was like, that lender is not going to be able to give the written statement on that date, but I'm not going to say anything. We're going to wait until that date arrives. Ask for that written statement. The lender's going to get it. Which of course, the buyers are going to be behind the scenes. And it said, you know, we're gonna cancel because I flow, which behind the scenes in reality, the reason why we needed to do it because I needed to get myself out of legal. But we can use that for advantage in that sense. So we allowed in that case for the buyer to get their money refunded, but we could have easily said that was paid by the seller. So then if the written statement is not provided, but the seller loses out, their agent loses out on calling them out on that date. So that's the circumstance, and that's why we need to be able to mark that date on our calendar. If we have that written statement date and we're representing the seller, that's our out, that's our chance. On that written statement date, we can cancel or call them out on it. Just the written statement date passes, or loses out on their opportunity to cancel. That makes sense.
We only have that date to do it. It's not any time thereafter.
Yep, that date is it. If the statement is not provided, we cancel the purchase agreement. If we get closed and it still does not go through, obviously we can cancel the purchase agreement, and then at that get to use their earnest money. So the written statement is not provided. The seller has not already canceled the purchase agreement by that date. The person canceled as of the date specified by information immediately cancel the PA, confirm said cancellation and direct amount of money either retained by the seller or paid, returned to the buyer. How do you guys usually fill this out? If you're representing the buyer.
How strong we need to make our offer.
Right, it depends on how strong you make the offer.
I mean, I would prefer refunded to buyer for both.
Absolutely. If I'm representing a seller, I definitely want that second one still to go to seller.
Because we get
all the way to closing, but it depends on how strong you want the offer to be. A lot of people will check that second box and not fully understand how that works. So if you check that second box, as an agent, whether you're representing both the buyer or the seller, there's an extra level of responsibility. And I'm shocked as to how many people just let it get past, especially listing agents. You owe that representation to your seller. You need to get, as promised, that letter on that date. And if you can't provide it, you do have the right to cancel. I mean, most times you probably wouldn't at that point in time. But what I would do is ask the lender, if you can't provide that today, then when? Well, tomorrow, okay, I'm gonna write an amendment to the first agreement then, saying that the new date is tomorrow, and you're still gonna be on the hook for that. Because I still don't want my seller to lose out on that opportunity to cancel if they should feel like this is gonna close. Any thoughts, questions on that?
So line 104 makes it seem like the seller would have the opportunity to declare the purchase agreement canceled at any time prior to the seller receiving the written statement. Like, to me, that means
You know, it sounds like it's open.
by that date, they would have any time after that. And then if they don't cancel, then it's just automatically canceled as of if it doesn't close, right?
Right.
So that line makes me think that they do have more time at any time prior.
Anytime prior,
So
but
that's legally,
it's only in regards to the financing, because it's a part of the financing contingency. I have agents that will say, no, this is a general. If seller could cancel at any time for any reason.
no, but I mean, it seems like they would have, and if the written statement is not provided by that date, it seems that line 104 makes me think they have at any time that they could, like, if it's not provided on the date and it gets to be the next day, that they could still cancel it because they still haven't received the written statement.
If the written statement is not provided by the date specified on line 77, the seller may declare this purchase agreement canceled by written notice at any time prior to the seller receiving the written statement in which this purchase agreement is canceled. I know it's confusing, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I guess it makes me think you would have more, you could do it at any point
Right,
after that date.
after that date.
Only that.
It's only,
So it's like, you know, they said, right, get to you tomorrow, I'll come around. I don't think that's, cancel us on day two, as long as we're past that date. I have. But.
right.
Yeah, that's how I'm reading it, but I mean, you're saying that's not correct.
The intent is that that date has to be that solid date. And if it's not received by that date, the seller then loses the opportunity to cancel the financing. Because the risk is not provided by the date specified in 77.
Think so. I think it's, once the date happens, it
Yes.
becomes the seller's option. And they have the option as long as the written statement doesn't show up. So it's like, if it's January, or it's January 1st, and then January 1st, 11:59 goes by, now they didn't get the written statement in. Now they've got that option period where if you want to cancel, if you don't want to, and then on January 3rd, the written statement shows up, they don't have the option anymore.
Yes. Yes, until then, but after the written statement. Yes.
Only have 24 hours to cancel, you have up until the written statement is received, assuming they're still sending it.
Yes. I thought you were talking about after the written statement can still cancel, but if the written statement has been.
Oh, right. No.
Has been,
Yeah.
but it's specifically not provided. Okay, so if the written statement is not provided by the date, unlike 27, if it's not provided by that date, seller may declare this purchase agreement canceled.
If they never provide it, they have up until, the date of closing. And if it doesn't close, then it's just automatically, that's where line 108 through 111 come into play, right?
You're seeing it as like if they didn't get that written statement the date specified at line 77, they still have the right to cancel, even though that written statement wasn't received. My talking to Lynn, understanding was that if you don't get that written statement by line 77, you've lost off. You've lost your opportunity. Because it says written notice of award, and it's kind of practice in receiving that written statement on the specified date. See what I'm saying? So this first sentence, the written statement is provided by the date specified on line 77. So there's your first sentence, right? If not received, the seller can declare the purchase to cancel or no need to buy at any time prior to receiving the written statement on that specified date.
So. The way I would, so basically the way I would understand it. Let's just say you have January 1st, right? It's December 30th, and you're like, you know what, we don't want to cancel, but the deadline is coming, or we see it's a good fund. Definitely, even though we have not. The buyers. That. Because finance is more or less stable. Is that really, I don't understand what he's saying.
What we could get in. If the written statement is not provided by the date.
Yeah,
So like you said, if the date was like January 30th,
right.
you don't get a written statement by that date. The seller can declare that canceled. Anytime prior to receiving by that date. So they could cancel before that date. Due to financing.
So. But what,
Better.
well, what was there, what did the seller, what did the buyer do to, they have not been by there, even though they still have. As long as it's not January, as long as it's not before that date, we are not. Still, before, they're still. They can reach it.
Right.
So you don't have a reference. Other than say, well, I don't think money is gonna go through it, I mean,
That's true.
so.
Why would you?
Yeah, what's stopping you from doing that all the time?
Well, right, why would you have the date in the first place?
Yeah,
Well, my understanding is. Okay, so let's say July. Too close to.
If you're too close to that.
So if we have to provide. Just hold this. If we have to provide. The written statement by. Well, maybe it's because it's too close to
Yeah.
that.
Be able to write them.
So do you have,
By July 30th.
so you have until 11:59 on that date? Okay, so then you have no time to cancel, if it has to be on that date.
So you would have to, it would be August 1st, or what is actually.
So they hold that written statement on the 30th and it doesn't come. And they get to the 31st. My understanding is that the seller has lost their opportunity to cancel.
Yeah, I think
That's when their option starts.
when you're out.
31st, as of midnight, their option, because it didn't show up at 11:59:59, their option to cancel starts. And they have the option of canceling the purchase agreement up to. And until they would give us a written statement. So they do have however long that takes between the expiration and the written statement showing up to cancel. That's how I read it. That's one of the reasons why we talk about this all the time, because I'm like, this is the most convoluted, confusing. And, you know, I mean, we're dissecting it here and it's still confusing. So, but that's how I'm understanding it.
because wouldn't be until 12:01 on July 31st, that's when the buyers fail to perform on the first.
Correct. It becomes all the seller option at that point.
Yeah.
As to whether they wanted to do that, and then go to line 107 and direct the money wherever it is.
Yeah.
But if the buyer's lender all of a sudden, 2 days later, here's the written statement date, and the sellers haven't made their decision, now their decision is over. Because now they've lost the delivery of the written statement date ends that seller's option period.
That's exactly how.
Okay.
But yeah, I can tell you how to read it the way you're interpreting here.
It's so.
When it's less confusing than it used to be, I think, but. I don't know.
We're all talking about this with Lynn, like, well,
Like, that was the lawyer that you spoke with.
They should-
About this. Oh,
Yeah, no, it wasn't. They should.
yeah.
Because what has happened in the past with transactions that I've had is that didn't receive that written statement on July 30th. Next day, I'm like, no, I didn't receive the written statement. I want to go back now as a seller and we want to cancel because we didn't get that written statement. The agent comes back and says you can't because you lost out on your opportunity. You could have canceled, but you had to have done that knowing you didn't, yeah, right with the midnight thing.
Yeah. I would say, you really want to keep it good, and which is, this is the forms. I have to have food right here on the one board. How?
Written statement is not received by July 30th. The buyer could cancel before that because they can't secure financing and get their earnest money back potentially if indicated on line 107.
I don't think you can. I mean, they'd have to have proof from there.
Well, they'd have to have proof from the lender, of course.
But,
That's the financing contingency for the buyer.
yeah.
Is this is saying that if the buyer can't secure financing by that written statement date, they can cancel the purchase agreement and get earnest money back as a result of not being able to. secure financing. That we do know. If you can't provide that letter, then the seller could cancel prior to closing. And specify here who gets the earnest money back at that point in time at line 11. Okay. I'm gonna double check with Lynn on that. I'm pretty sure. Is that all spoken out that?
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm
Okay,
a little.
still, isn't that weird though? It's still dates. That we're all in agreement, right? That's what that's designated for is 107 is giving that buyer the opportunity to have that financing contingency still, that drop dead date. And then after that drop dead date, the buyer no longer has the ability potentially to get their earnest money back, depending on how.
This is another thing people are doing is they're just checking the first box, but they're checking retained by seller. Just to keep, so that there's some teeth for the seller.
Yeah.
If everything is, if you check the first box and it says, refunded to buyer, oh, we didn't get our financing, we get our earnest back. There's
Exactly.
no teeth in it for the seller.
That's how that first one is written, is if you get all the way to closing and the buyer can't secure financing, then they would get the earnest money back.
Right. And at least they added that box now, retained.
Yeah, I'm gonna counter offer that as a listing condition to the seller and.
Right.
Not getting all the way to closing, if the financing goes through. If that financing goes through for any reason prior to closing, that seller's going to be able to retain the earnest money.
Yep.
The second box is more of a compromise, in my opinion. Because at least it gives the buyer the opportunity for a little bit before closing to have the financing contingency, depending on all that. Interesting though, because line 107 retained by the seller, and the other contingency box retained by the sellers, the same.
Or less.
Okay, I feel better now that we got all that. equalized. Okay, we got about 8 minutes left. Any other part that you guys want to talk about? Otherwise, I've got an idea about what I want to. One of the things I want to point out that I also learned the hard way is when it talks about title and examination. On 92. In the event the seller has not provided marketable title by the date of closing, the seller shall have an additional 30 days to make the title marketable. Or the buyer can make the defects. That's an automatic 30-day extension. I didn't know about that until it started happening to buyers. We had a situation where we got to the closing date and the seller still did not provide a marketable title. And so at that point until we're at the closing, my buyer could have assumed the deed with those defects. They couldn't get it. Automatically, the seller's given a 30-day extension. Right, that. The buyers wanted out, we couldn't get out. Because of the 30-day extension. That's the seller claim, we need that, use that to provide the title. So that's an interesting one too, that I, where I'm into that.
So that would be a situation where in our previous transaction, one of the spouses, the kid, the ones that sign, cloud, defect them. And they have to address that, that's where that's kind of the classes.
Yeah, yeah, mine was similar to where, it was something that gotten mixed up with a family in a date situation. And they couldn't quite clear the title from the state. I don't remember the details of it. They had been working on it. We were having issues, and by the time we got to the closing date, they still didn't resolve them. And so at this point, my buyers were really put out and wanted to be done and move on to something else, and they couldn't. Because the seller is given 30 days extension unless party agrees to cancel. We didn't. The seller said, I'm not going to sign a cancellation because I know I can provide your title in the next 30 days, so I want to take advantage of that extension. Then once the extension happens, still can't provide a title, then they can cancel. Get buyer gets earnest money back. So one other one I want to quick talk about, is actually not on the PA, is arbitration. I'm a nerd and I spent like 6 hours studying arbitration last week. Weird. But I wanted to make sure I really do, because I was teaching a small class, it was continuing ed. And it was a room full of about 75 agents that in the business forever. And I got so many mixed responses about the arbitration agreement actually means. And it was really scary. It's like, okay, you guys even know they're doing this for a long time. And that started giving me to lose myself and my understanding of the arbitration. So a couple of things that I knew, but it wasn't 100% clear is that, well, number one is use the MAR. There's a, and actually I think you can download it off of transaction. That it's like 12-page booklet on explaining arbitration and the pros and cons. And so just give that to clients, and I'm giving that to them at my buyer consult and my listing. I've been telling them to read through this, because when we get to the point of signing a purchase agreement, you're going to be faced with having to make a decision in terms of what would happen in the event that the buyer finds something over the closing that they feel the seller didn't disclose. It's true. You have the opportunity to take legal action. So number one is, regardless of whether they sign arbitration or not, if the claim is $15,000 or less, it automatically goes to the litigation court, regardless of whether arbitration was signed or not. That's the default. So any claims under 15,000 goes to the monthly agent part, period. The arbitration agreement discusses what happens for claims over 15,000. When you sign the arbitration agreement for that purpose, it's $15,000 or more. You're gonna do the arbitration, or the other option is to take it to district court. And so if you sign arbitration, you're giving up your right to go to court for claims over 15,000. You automatically still go to court over claims under 15,000. That makes sense? And so then it's a matter of what are the pros and cons then of arbitration versus district court. So people got really confused over that when we were talking about that. Another thing that they didn't quite understand is that if one agent ends up not signing the arbitration agreement, it is void. You have to have both agents sign it as well. And there's certain brokers out there now that are saying to their agents, do not sign arbitration. And so if you have an agent that works the opposite of that didn't sign it, that makes the arbitration agreement void. And it also counts for if that disclosure, if those issues include the agent, not between the buyer and the seller. So those are things too that the a lot of agents don't understand. It doesn't include this buyer and seller issue. It also allows for legal action between brokers as well.
So if your clients don't sign it, but you and the other agent sign it, then you're agreeing at least between the two brokerages. No,
All four parties have to sign in order for arbitration to be the recourse. So any missing signatures, it's not valid.
Is our brokerage policy still in the sign?
Yeah, I mean, I talked to Lynn about that last week. You know, Lynn had said she wants to think about that now, but so far she's given us the opportunity to sign. But like I said, there are brokerages out there now that are telling agents don't sign the arbitration. So, interesting.
benefit of not signing.
So the benefit of not signing arbitration means you take it to district court. And so in district court, one of the main differences is in court you can appeal versus in arbitration. It's not that you can't appeal, but it's very difficult to appeal. No, it's impossible to appeal. And so some people will say, I don't ever want to give up my opportunity for that. I want to give up an opportunity to be presented in front of a judge and jury versus an arbitration. It's just one person that their decision is final. Some people just aren't comfortable with that. People choose arbitration because it's faster. It's less expensive and people want that cheaper, faster resolution oftentimes. So those are really the main pros and cons to that. All right, any other questions, comments? Kind of helpful. I can tell you a arbitration story later too. I've been through a couple of those. I open. All right, thanks to everyone online too. Everyone have a good afternoon. Yeah.
Thank you. It's laughable though. You know, I'm reading one moment. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good. You do an open house with Marissa over the weekend?
What is that?
Did you do the open house with Marissa over the weekend? Or someone else?